It's a new day on Deep Space Nine, and with it, a new face. A doorbell indicates visitors, though not ones he knows. Jake and Elwood here are rather insistent on coming in, and Jake gets a bit handsy when our new face complains. They're here for an item, one that the resident claims no knowledge of, but he changes his tune when Elwood says they know all about him being here to trade the item with an unknown woman. Playing along is a ploy though, and our new face pulls a weapon, only for Jake to get there first and murderize him. With their current lead turned to ash, Elwood says they'll have to wait for the woman. While they wait, we go to Quark's. Bashir's got another of his legally distinct Bond programs, and this time is inviting people to join. Odo's one of them, though he decides against it and leaves with apologies, possibly due to learning there'll be romance involved. He instead goes downstairs where Quark is bothering a customer. As we're going to be seeing a bit more of her this episode, let's drag out the wheel of names and provide one of our own. We'll be calling them... Frank Drebin, provided by Ensign Adam Maltonian. Odo intervenes to stop Quark's advances, but he need not have bothered. Frank Drebin gets rid of him herself by pointing out a pair of his customers are cheating at Darbo, and he runs off to save his latinum. That earns a compliment from Odo, which Frank assumes was intended as something more. Odo stumbles his way through explaining that's not what he meant, which might be why she compliments him back. That throws him even more off guard, so he retreats to his office after telling her to let him know if anybody else harasses her. The offer might be useful, as the entire exchange was observed by Jake and Elwood. It's still on Odo's mind later when he's in a cargo bay with Kira as he's looking at his reflection. Frank Drebin complimented his eyes, you see, and Odo's trying to understand it. Kira wheedles the truth out of him and, after hearing it, suggests he should consider trying to see her again. Finding a reason to see Frank Drebin becomes unnecessary when he returns to his office and finds her there after being caught by another security officer. She was trying to break into the station's computer, apparently, and via some brainial hardware most commonly associated with nefarious shit. Frank says she was just trying to access passenger lists, as the person she's here to meet didn't show, and after Odo explains he's going to find out what it's about regardless, she tells him her contact has information about the daughter she gave up shortly after birth. Odo knows the guy she was waiting for is on the station, so either through kindness or a desire to make sure she's not talking bollocks, they go and see him together. Or would have done, except she's meeting the new face who got vaporized earlier, and the scorch marks on his carpet aren't feeling particularly talkative. Frank Drebin doesn't think what happened could have any bearing on her or her daughter. Someone who tracks down secrets would naturally come into contact with particularly shady characters, so him getting roasted is more likely connected to something else. Odo's not entirely convinced, but there's nothing much to be done. He also chooses not to follow up on her attempted hacking, possibly because the target isn't in any condition to make a complaint. Maybe that's why she feels like having another go, this time tracking the property of our victim. She's coming out of a door on the promenade sometime later, which is where Odo collars her. The data storage crystal she found is significantly more secure than the average, certainly more than would be needed for information on a lost daughter. A mention of Bashir checking to see if she was ever pregnant means that game is up, and she admits this has nothing to do with the child. In fact, she doesn't even know what's on the crystal herself. Lore dump time, and Frank Drebin here works for a lad in the Orion Syndicate, Star Trek's version of the space mafia. He's a blackmailer, and she's someone who supplies him with data, or did anyway, as she's trying to get out, a choice of which the space mafia generally disapprove. Enter our murder victim, who contacted Frank and said he had data she could use to get out. She can't give a good reason for why she trusted a complete stranger with a promise of freedom, and simply puts it down to desperation. Anywho, she thinks her space mafia boss must have found out she planned to scarp her and intervene to stop her getting the data crystal. She also assumes whoever did it is still here and looking for the crystal too, which is why Odo's choosing to involve himself. Frank Drebin will be held for her protection whilst Odo gets to the bottom of it all, something for which she's both thankful and complimentary. At least part of her story is true, as Jake and Elwood have been keeping tabs on her and know she's got the data storage, the opening of which they're very keen to prevent. Just as well that Odo's good at his job then. The guest quarters he takes Frank Drebin to are a ruse, and they instead teleport to his home. Handily, he decided to keep the bed after getting rid of most of his humanoid furniture. She'll be sleeping in there while he stays in the main room to keep an eye. Maybe it's a chance to get more data too, as he's not been able to identify the contact who got turned into dust, something not helped by the guy in question taking quite a few precautions. Odo's given the appropriate authorities a call but hasn't heard anything back yet, and he's got Dax and O'Brien working on the crystal. That means there's nothing to do but wait, which also means it's time for Frank to worry about the situation she's in and give we viewers another lore dump. Learning how she came to be working for her space mafia boss and eventually couldn't keep ignoring how the data she stole was being used leads Odo to promise that he'll protect her. Not through whatever data the crystal holds, but by being a witness against her boss and putting him away. The parallel with his time under the Cardigans is part of his desire to help, but not all of it. That's why he's interrupting Bashir's holosuite time to ask how you can tell if someone's attracted to you. The DS9 rumour mill means Bashir's not surprised by the question and says Odo should go for it. After all, not doing so is the same result as a no. It would seem he takes the advice to heart, as later that evening when he returns home, their banter turns into face smashing, which itself turns into a bit of the old dirty little bastard. The DS9 rumour mill is in full swing in ops, with all the main cast currently present engaging in it. Odo's a little late for a meeting, you see, something that's entirely unheard of, and it doesn't take a detective to put the clues together. His arrival stops the gossiping, but only until he moves to another room. People doing things behind his back is somewhat of a theme, as Frank Drebin is sending a message to her old space mafia boss using Odo's computer. A bit embarrassing for the chief of security. Jake and Elwood get word shortly after that Frank's made a deal to hand over the crystal in exchange for being left alone. Naturally, they still plan to murderize her afterwards. Assuming they get the chance, Odo's got a visitor and it's about his message for information on Frank Drebin's contact. This lad here is from the relevant government, and he's very interested in making sure Frank is safe. Understandable, really, when she's an intelligence operative so deep undercover that even she doesn't know it, what with all of her real memories being shunted onto a data crystal. A slight problem, that particular memory stick, pun intended, has been half-inched. O'Brien's on the floor, but is able to tell them Frank Drebin herself nicked the thing, just as well that it can be tracked, really, so off we go in pursuit. Frank's already in a cargo bay and meeting up with Elwood. He's learned from the unpleasantness at the start of the episode at least, and has Frank prove she's unarmed before proceeding. The handover concludes and Frank moves to leave, only to be surprised by Jake. Jake himself is surprised in turn by the doors opening. That's to distract from Odo gooping in above them, and he drops onto Elwood, which is unfortunate when Jake's the one with the gun. Frank takes care of him until backup arrives, not that Jake's surrender stops Odo from knocking the shit out of him anyway. We're in the infirmary, and Frank Drebin is getting her memories squirted back in. Her associate explains this was the only way an undercover agent would work, as her space mafia boss uses psychic shenanigans to scan potential employees. The dead contact was an activation switch of sorts, someone she'd instinctively trust and leave to meet, bringing with her enough evidence to put her boss away. That all went down the shitter somewhere along the line, and the chance it was due to an intercepted message meant they couldn't warn us. That's why they sent someone personally. A little while later, Odo has a visitor at home. He's introduced to the real Frank Drebin, though that's not her actual name. Oh, and she's married, so that's a bit of a pisser too. She departs with the promise to never forget him, which seems a bit optimistic for someone who fucks about with her memories, so we'll leave Odo to deal with having loved and lost. Until the next adventure. You know, this is the second time a main cast member has fallen in love with a woman who didn't really exist, which isn't a lot, I'll grant you, but it's still weird that it's happened more than once, right? Second Sight from Season 2 had Cisco getting all worked up over the unconscious psychic projection of a married woman, an idea not all that removed from what happens here to Odo. It's doomed from the start, of course. Anybody familiar with Trek will know that a relationship with someone who's not a recurring character is going straight down the shitter, and even that's not a guarantee, as Vedek Bareil would tell you if he wasn't too busy being a robo-corpse. With that in mind, then, it ended about as well as it could have done. A broken heart, but not a shattered one. Odo's first reciprocal romantic involvement wasn't a screaming disaster that will traumatize him for the rest of the series. I say first romantic involvement as his goopy fun times with Odetta were referred to as analogous with sex, but made no mention of emotional connection, and he's certainly never given that impression about her even before she pretended to be Kira dying in a crystal. Come to think of it, this is probably the most positive experience he's had to date. The perpetual denial of a relationship with Kira has brought him nothing but woe in the long run, and the business with Roxana would have been a terrible error if she'd allowed him to do it. It's a sad state of affairs when the woman who never was provides your best memories of romance. That's enough of that then, so let's look at the other points of interest we learned here. First off, we discover that Odo decided to keep the bed after all. 3 episodes back, he'd mentioned to Kira that he enjoyed sleeping when he was a solid, but that it stopped being an option when he returns to liquid form and planned to remove the bed. That he still has it gives us some possibilities. Option 1, he just hasn't found the time to remove it yet. The choice was 3 episodes ago, but that doesn't mean much, and Odo's regularly busy. Option 2, he decided reclining was sufficiently pleasant even after becoming a changeling. He said he enjoys reading of an evening, so if he stays solid during, maybe it's for that. Option 3, he kept it for others, which doesn't feel very likely given his aversion to guests, but perhaps he was more open to the idea after having Roxana visit. Odo still having a bed in his quarters is a small detail, I'll grant you, but possibly one with implications for Odo's current attitude. Speaking of which, we also learn he regrets working for the Cardigans, despite his neutrality being applauded by the Bajorans themselves. He claims he didn't have the courage to stop, but would that really have been the preferred choice for those on the receiving end of a Cardigan boot? Guilt is sometimes an irrational thing, though, and his successes may not weigh as much to him as his failures. It was only earlier this season that we learned a miscarriage of justice on his watch was kept secret because of shame. That he would remember this rather than the hundreds or thousands he saved from unfair retaliation is perhaps a reflection of his weighted feelings on the matter. Elsewhere, we had some potentially conflicting behaviour from Kira. When she learns Odo has been complimented, she says he should follow it up. Upon learning that he has, she acts somewhat more reserved and disbelieving. Is that just surprise at him actually doing it, or an indication of something more confusing for her? She did agree with the compliment, after all. A little reading tells me this episode was meant to be an indication that the Kira-Odo thing was now considered a closed avenue, so it's odd that she reacts in a way that could be interpreted as the opposite. Perhaps I'm reading too much into it, or perhaps those involved didn't want to burn any bridges they didn't need to. Lastly, then, we have Bashir and his legally distinct James Bond rip-off, though now he's inviting others to join in. The last time we saw him in his fantasy world was when Plain Simple Garak broke into it and implied Bashir was embarrassed by it being seen. Given what we now know about Bashir, that hesitancy at having Plain Simple Garak present may have been less embarrassment, and more to do with the Super Spy program being the only real place where he can fully flex his genetically altered attributes. And that secret now being out may be why he feels he can invite others to join, perhaps even as a way of acclimatizing them to the reality of who he is without the mask. It's a somewhat curious choice when you consider 2 of the 3 people he invites were nearly killed in a previous, albeit unintentional adventure, but I suppose you get blasé about that sort of thing when you've had a life-and-death experience every week for nearly 5 years now. End of episode.
So, how you doing there, buddy?
You mean after you rewired me chuffing brain?
I've already apologized for that.
I can spell colours, you dickhead.
Dr. Bashir said it'll wear off eventually. Think of it as an interesting experience while it lasts.
It's easy for you to say. You haven't experienced the taste of someone screaming Darbo.
Perhaps getting back to what we laughably call the plot of these credit skits will distract you?
Worth a shot, I suppose. So, now we've comprehensively ruled out brainial interfaces and risk being sued by the Frank Herbert estate in the process, where does that leave us in trying to control our emulated copy of Windows 95 so we can ride a search engine to the GeoCity and escape this lad's computer to nick his Pringles?
A masterful summary.
Thank you very much.
Well, honestly, we're a bit stuffed as I'm running out of ideas.
Oh. Only this is the bit where you usually come up with something outlandishly.
Or at least I was running out of ideas until I watched today's episode. You see, there's a woman in it who installs a data port in her skull, and then
And you can fuck right off with that plan and all. Oof.